Hey friends, welcome, welcome. This is Julie. Today we're going to be making a mixed media card with the August Paper Pad Club. This video is part of a hop, so be sure to check the description box below for the collaboration playlist and all the hop details. So for this mixed media background, we're going to be using some distress watercolor cardstock along with that chicken wire stencil and some distress oxides. I'm starting with very soft pale colors in my chosen palette, which is red and green, to go with the papers and stamps in the August Paper Pad Club. And I have chosen Tattered Rose and Shabby Shutters to add my first layer of color. And my first layer I always do in a very soft, with my softest colors and a very light hand, just to kind of test out where I want those colors to be, and then we can build up later. I spritz this with a little water, and then I'm blotting it off with a paper towel. I'll remove the stencil and do just a little bit of heat setting for that. Now I'm going to do a little ink smooshing with Barn Door Distress ink, and I have applied that to my little mat, and I'm picking it up with a little handmade pouncer. This is just like a wadded up paper towel inside a garbage bag, and I tied it together, and it just helps me control where I'm going to add that ink to the paper. I feel like I have a little more control than tapping the paper onto my mat. And so I'm just doing the same thing with the Tattered Rose Distress Oxide and just tapping in those pink areas where I want it to be. And then I'm just going to heat set this. It's important when you're building layers to definitely dry your inks in between so that they don't blend together. Distress oxides will layer over another color, so that's a really fun effect, but you definitely want to make sure things are dry, because when red and green get together, it makes brown, and we don't want a big muddy mess. So I'm just continuing. I added some more of that Shabby Shutters ink in there, and I did a little drying, and now I'm going to reapply that stencil just basically where I had it before and go in with some of this darker ink. I'm going in with peeled paint and just blending that out, darkening areas. I left some of it, just the Shabby Shutters, but I did want to deepen it quite a bit. Once I've done that, I am going to pull in the Perfectly Plaid stencil, and I'm going to do a little spritzing with some Barn Door and peeled paint distress spritz. So I'm just going to spray that Barn Door, add a little water, blot it off, and heat set. Then I'm just going to clean off my stencil with a little bit of water before laying it back down onto my paper, lining up that stencil, and I'm going to pull in the peeled paint distress spritz. And I just like the way that this peeled paint distress spritz has just a little bit of a darker color than the peeled paint distress oxide did, so it just gives another layer of dimension to our background. And then I just did a little bit of sprinklings, and I am just going to hit that with my heat tool again. And then once it's dry, I am going to pull back in some of that Tattered Rose Distress Oxide, and I'm just going to try and bring back a little bit of the pink in some of the areas. And it also helps to kind of fade away any lines of that stencil where there might be harsh lines in between the colors. And so I'm going to do the same thing with that Shabby Shutters ink, and then I will go in with the peeled paint. And I'm just really loving the flow of the ink colors as well as the difference in patterns. The plaid and the chicken wire together kind of makes me happy. I'm spritzing some water on that just to activate those oxides, and then drying. And now I am going in with some archival ink in peeled paint and Barn Door and that apple stamp from the Stamp of the Month. And I am going to do the green areas with the green ink and the red areas with the red ink. And I'm using archival ink because I'm not sure at this point which mediums I'm still going to add to this, and so I wanted something that would be permanent if I still put a wet medium over the top. So now I'm just going to go in with the Barn Door and do the same thing, just some random stamping, some off the edge, some completely on, just kind of trying to get it to look like it flows really well. And once I have it stamped the way I want it, I am going to pull out some bleed-proof white ink, and I am going to just splatter that on with a wet fan brush and just get some nice little white splatters going on. And this ink does not bleed, so I don't have to worry about my inks underneath reactivating. So I have dried that off screen, and now I am just going to lay it down on a grip mat, reposition that stencil, and I'm using crystal clear stellar paste. And I had originally wanted to use a white paste on this. That was what my mind was envisioning, but I was actually envisioning the chicken wire part being white. And I realized with this stencil that it was going to be white, covering a lot of the background. So I am just going in with this crystal clear one. I'll wipe that off with a squeegee, and then I will hit that with the heat tool to get it dry. And this gives it a really nice finish. It looks a little bit shiny here, but that's because it hasn't completely dried yet. And it will blend really well into the background. It just adds some extra texture. Off screen, I stamped and colored that basket with Copic markers, and I just didn't want that white look, so I'm going around it with the antique linen oxide, but it's covering up some of the brightness that I want to the stamped image. So I am just going in with a baby wipe and lightly just pouncing that on. You don't want to rub too hard because your paper will pill, but just get some of that extra ink off. And now I've decided, after making that big background, that I am just going to use a portion of this, and that means I can save it for another day. So I am just tearing this panel into a rectangle to go onto my card. And if you tear towards yourself, you're going to get that white border. I want the white border, but I don't want it to be stark white, so I'm going to go in with that antique linen distress oxide again and just add it around the edges so it has a nice cohesive look with my stamped image. So I selected the barn door paper from the Apple Days paper pad, and I cut that to 3¼ by 5 inches. And now I'm just taking some sand ink and a baby wipe, and I'm going to apply that directly to that paper. I didn't want it to look as nice, red and shiny like a brand new door. I wanted that aged look, and the baby wipe helps kind of soften the look of the paint. You don't get as much paint on it, and it kind of dilutes it a little bit. And then I'm just going to dry that. I just really like the kind of faded, weathered look that gives to the pattern paper. And then I'm just going to bring in a distressing tool and rough up those edges just to kind of age the paper a little bit further. I'm going in deeper on some areas, but keeping it pretty light. And then I will come in with some vintage photo I think it's gathered twigs distress oxide, and I'll deepen up the edges of this with a blending tool. I'm going to be using a cream cardstock for my sentiment and my card base, so I just want to make sure that none of those little white spots are showing. And I'm just going to fuss with those edges just a little bit. In the corners, I want them to kind of curl down a little bit, and I've decided that I want my panel to be kind of at an angle with that apple basket in the center. This Warm Hug Sentiment is part of my Fall Friends digital sentiment PDF that I designed as a community reward for our Autumn Greetings retreat kit. I'm super excited about teaching at the Autumn Greetings Retreat. If you want to know more about it, if you haven't heard about it yet, check the description box below for the link to the retreat. We'd love to see you there. And I have pulled in some red cardstock. I embossed the matting panel with a chicken wire embossing folder, and then I cut the sentiment with the frame from one of the frames from the Ultimate Sentiments die set. And now I'm just going to go in and rough up the edges of both of these panels just so that it looks cohesive with everything else. And I'm being a little careful here because I did spritz my panel with water before I embossed it. And then I decided to just crumple it up, and because it has been spritzed, this works pretty well just to get a nice little texture to the back of that cardstock. And then I am just going to glue that barn door panel down, and then I will pull in my A2 cream card base and add in a little bit of that Distress Oxide antique linen around the edges, and I'll do the same treatment to the sentiment. And then I'm going to glue this panel to my A2 card base, and we are on the home stretch. Once that's down and centered, I am just going to burnish that really well and kind of fiddle with those bent edges. I like them to bend separately from each other, so just a little fiddling. And then I am going to add a little bit of that gathered twigs around the edges of that panel just to darken it up a little bit. And I went around the apple too. I decided I wanted it just a little bit darker than just the antique linen there. And so I'm just going to layer those on. The background that we made is going to go up on dimensional foam just to give it a little lift. And then I'm just going to add that sentiment over it, adding some dimensional foam to it as well so that it can pop. I just love that warm hugs with the little heart. Just feels like a down home country day, a fall day. I grew up in apple country, so have fond memories of the autumn season with all the apples and all the activities that went along with apple season. And so I'm just going to place that sentiment down on foam tape, kind of more to the right than to the left. And then we're going to add a little bit of glitz to our apples. I'm pulling in some glossy glaze. It's just in a fine tip bottle, so it's easy for me to apply. And I'm applying it to all of the red parts of the apples just to give them a little bit of shine. And I just can't seem to not put a little bit of glossy glaze and glitter on my cards. That's just one of the things I love. So I'm just going to continue doing that, and then I will sprinkle just a little bit of glitter on them just to give them a little sparkle and shine. And then I'll finish with just a little bit of a twine ribbon and some more distressing along the edges of that card. As I mentioned before, this video is part of a hop. I apologize that I don't have the special offer information right now because I had to film this before I left on vacation, but I will have the details in the description box below, so be sure and check that description box for the offer information and anything else about the hop. And you can also get links to the projects, the Autumn Greetings retreat, as well as the collaboration playlist, so you can see everybody's projects. Thank you so much for stopping by. I love it when you're here. Please let me know if you'd like to see more mixed media card making adventures. I just love to read your comments, so it always warms my heart when I see them. That is our finished card. I love the glitter and shine. I did foil that sentiment with my foil machine, and I just love the way things turned out. Thanks once again for being here, and I'll catch you on the next one.